Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to host our first webinar of 2021. So what's really interesting is we listed 2020. That's not correct. It is no longer 2020. Um, I'll start off with welcoming welcoming Gordon to our webinar, who is a principal at Expertainment, formerly a CMO at Princess Cruises and EVP at Disney Studios. Gordon and his team drove business building experience initiatives, including Discovery at Sea, bringing Discovery Channel and Animal Planet experiences to Princess, and new culinary offerings, including Chef Curtis Stone's first restaurant at sea. Gordon spearheaded Princess Cruises personalization at scale, which I'm very excited to hear more about, as he'll share some of that with us, and a lot around customer lifetime value and the double-digit ROI improvements that were driven because of that. At Disney, as Disney's executive vice president of marketing, a lot of the content and technology, which within home entertainment, Gordon's team created Disney's $3 billion direct-to-video category, launched the industry's #1 loyalty program with Disney Movie Rewards, and partnered on numerous franchises, franchise success, including Lion King, High School Musical, Disney Fairies, and ABC's Lost. And he currently serves on the advisory board of Simul Media, driving data-driven TV ads, and the board of CAPE, fostering diversity in entertainment. And we're very glad to have you here, Gordon.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Give you guys a little bit about my background as well. Many of you guys know me. My name is Imad Hassan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Retna. And for those of you who are new to Retna, we are a software SaaS business that predicts customer lifetime value at the individual customer level. And as far as we know, are the only company that can predict customer lifetime value early on in a customer's journey, that you can start to optimize customer lifetime, optimize your customer acquisition strategies in addition to retention strategies based on customer lifetime value. And we also recently have a very exciting product that helps you do a lot of company health reporting type of metrics, and we'll show you some cool stuff from there as well. But welcome, everyone. I also wanted to mention that I have Carolyn helping me run the webinar. So thank you so much for all of the effort that went into setting everything up. And please let me know, Carolyn, if you're running over and under on time, and as we do some of the polls throughout. All right, with that, let's get started. Here's kind of the agenda, everyone. We're going to very quickly cover logistics and introductions, which we're already into. We're going to start off with let's chat about 2020, what happened, and how are we feeling about that. I would love for, as usual, a lot of audience participation. A lot of this is less about us talking about stuff to you guys, but rather have you participate and ask questions, not only about what happened in 2020, but I'm really excited to learn from Gordon about his experiences back at Disney and Princess Cruises around how customer lifetime value was implemented there. He's had the luxury of working with Peter Fader in the past, who obviously is the guru in customer lifetime value. I'll share some insights about Retna's early days in our work with Dollar Shave Club, and some insights that are shareable that I can share. So excited about that. But as I'm doing that, please start to, as usual, please start to think about questions and line them up, and we'll take multiple points of pauses to talk about those questions and have some discussion points ready. But yeah, with that, maybe let's get started. And I'll start with 2020 recap metrics. We were able to pull some metrics from McKinsey, which were around 75% of customers tried a new shopping behavior, 40% of customers tried new brands during the pandemic, 65% plan to continue the new ways of shopping, and only 60% of companies really feel prepared to capture the e-commerce growth opportunities that are about to happen. So, with that, it'd be a good starting point. Gordon, I'd like to hear your perspective. Let's open up our first poll while we chat about this, because I want to be able to get some answers and audience participation going to start with. But Gordon, what are your thoughts? How do you think companies should think about this stickiness of their of the new customer behavior?
Well, I'm going to take this poll as well, but I think it's come a necessity, right? Because of COVID, you've seen so many people have to pivot, whether it's changing their distribution mechanisms, changing their product offerings in light of the circumstances presented by the pandemic. And I think it's only natural. I think the key, as McKinsey's uncovered, is that, and some of this was due to the fact that maybe the regular product that you as a customer wanted to buy was no longer available, right? Remember, we all know about shortages of certain products, be it toilet paper or antiseptic or whatever. And so people had to look at new places, new brands. So the question is, given this issue and or opportunity, are all of us able to sustain that behavior if you are a benefactor because you were able to pivot quicker? I think that's the key question, if they can sustain that lifetime value.
Yeah, the one thing that like we get asked about is how should they think about like which customers are impacted. And I remember when we were chatting about this, one really insightful thing you had talked about is people who see the benefit of this change, that it wasn't in their consideration, and the currency of time, that if they're feeling that. Do you want to share your thoughts a little about that?
Yeah, when people start to figure out like, okay, what are the things that are going to be important to a consumer? Obviously, right now they have to feel safe, right? First and foremost, especially for me who come from hospitality, feeling safe is going to be critical for any resumption of service. But beyond that, there a lot of people who changed behavior, they looked at, was this a time savings for me, was this a convenience for me? Some it may be tied to safety, right? The fact that, hey, I don't have to spend an hour shopping for groceries, you know maybe I'll continue doing delivery of groceries. Think about medicine. A lot of folks who have to go for, let's say, a monthly checkup to a doctor have discovered telemedicine. And for some of these
Yeah.
people, maybe older folks who maybe don't drive that well, it's a whole lot more convenient to have the doctor take a look at your shoulder or wherever they have to look at, through telemedicine. And I think this has accelerated the adoption, especially among certain cohorts like older folks. They've been, if they didn't have a smartphone, there's a good chance they have one now. If they weren't using Zoom, there's a good chance they are now. And so I think that's what's interesting, is that, and the behaviors that'll stick, a lot of it will be due to value, including time savings and convenience. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I imagine like the behavior is not only in consumers, but even businesses, even small businesses, thinking about like companies that were not early adopters of, let's say, Uber Eats or DoorDash. All of a sudden, if you're running a business, you're like, hey, look, this is what the customers are demanding. So they switch to that modality of delivering food, maybe that they weren't maybe going to do previously.
Absolutely. Again, this was the pivot that it accelerated. And so I think, some have, I don't know if they've thrived, maybe some have thrived, but some have made do. They've been able to scale accordingly to the new operation that they've done. And, others haven't. It's really sad to
Yeah.
see some of my favorite restaurants are out of business right now. I hope they can come back at some point, but it's really been, quite a shot in the arm for us in so many ways. And I don't know why that expression came into my head. Maybe because we're all going to get shots in the arm, hopefully, in the months ahead. We'll see. All right.
Yeah, I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what the poll results were. I don't know if you can. Is there? All right, there we go. I'm seeing it. So, Carolyn, thank you for. Yeah, so most companies, it seems like they've adopted. About 40% of you said that you've changed. You've improved existing functions. That's cool. Any
Yep.
questions? Before we jump into the stories that I know Gordon's going to share, any other questions about 2020 and what you're thinking about 2021? And feel free to share them either in the chat or in the Q&A. All right, I don't see any so far, so let's keep moving. All right, let's get to the fun stuff. So customer stories. I want to set this up. So Gordon, we've been working with companies that depend on repeat purchase behavior for the last 4 years, and here are some of the questions that keep coming up. And I want to hear after this, like, have you jump into your stories from some of your previous experiences, but these three are top of mind for me because they come up so often. This is why like I get excited chatting with companies, because the question on what journeys are customers taking that result in my highest retention and highest lifetime value behavior compared to my worst customers? What are the drivers behind high and low value customers? Once I know my CLV, which customers should I target first? Like, should I go after the highest value target customers and just keep targeting those, or do I like go after my lowest value customers? And what should be the strategy behind that? So these come up very often, and I'll kick it off with maybe the couple of stories from early days at Dollar Shave Club, things I can share without breaking any NDAs. We started working with Dollar Shave Club early days of Retina with their former CFO Dan Murray, and the question that we helped them answer early on was, what are the drivers of lifetime value? So you've computed customer lifetime value at the individual customer level. That's great, but what do I do with it? Like, how do I understand the behavior of customers that drives high value versus low value behavior? So in mathematical modeling, anytime you build a model, one thing you can do is you can give it a bunch of labels, which is we distributed customers into high value customers and low value customers. And very similar to linear regression, we put in a bunch of independent variables to see if a model can distinguish between a high value customer and a low value customer. And as a byproduct of building a model, one thing you get is a bunch of variable importance metrics. And if you've done any kind of linear regression, you'll remember that there are coefficients that get attached to every independent variable that suggest how important is that coefficient, or how important is that independent variable. So that's the kind of analysis that we ran that was very interesting and revealed some really interesting trends. So I'm sharing some obvious ones that like you'll know that were pretty revealing. So for example, we noticed that customers that are in rural areas tend to be much higher lifetime value customers. And we scratched our heads for a long time of like, what's going on? Why is that? Why would it be that those customers are different? And if you think about how far they might be living from a grocery store or a convenience store, there was a high correlation between the distance from that and what they preferred in terms of either online service or going to the store. So that was really interesting. Another one that was a more universal one that once we saw this with Dollar Shave Club, we're like, hey, this is probably true for many other similar businesses, is what a customer purchases during their first purchase that can make their experience with that product much better. So for example, if you're buying a razor and you can somehow include probably a lower cost, but it's something like a shaving cream or a sample of a shaving cream that makes it easier to have a good experience with the product, it can increase the length of the customer's lifetime. So those are kind of really interesting, revealing experiences that we learned at Retina very early on, and we're like, hey, this is probably a similar strategy is probably true for other companies, and that was a very interesting case. But I'm sure that similar stories exist from your experience, Gordon. So maybe I'll let you kind of share your experiences at Disney and Princess next.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'll spend a few minutes talking about Princess first and then Disney. Princess, like other cruise lines, and those of you who are cruisers may know that cruising really stopped, and there's been no sailing since March 13th due to the CDC no sail order. Basically, due to COVID and safety concerns, cruising has been basically stopped. I have a visual there. You see all the cruise ships all docked and idle. They've been sitting idle since March for the most part. And cruising may not resume, maybe late spring, maybe summer of this year, 2021. So it's been a long time. And so I think one of the questions in terms of the cruise category and Princess is going to be, are they able to fill their ships up when cruising resumes? Is there going to be a fear factor about going back? And I think one of the great things that cruising enjoys, and Princess in particular, is a very high loyalty and high net promoter score. So when you think about customer lifetime value, as you were saying, Imad, a big part of it is going to be, do they continue to purchase with you? Do you retain them? Do they come back? And a big driver of that typically for most businesses is guest satisfaction and net promoter score. And for those who don't know, if you haven't enjoyed a cruise, and just so you know, statistically, 3/4 of you will never take a cruise in your lifetime. Only about 1 out of 4 people do take a cruise. And that's one of the upside benefits or opportunities for cruise. The fact is, the average cruiser finds that they enjoy a cruise much better than a land-based vacation. So you have that satisfaction in the category. The other thing for Princess that's going to help them resume services, they have this probably the best loyalty program called Captain Circle, where people really look forward to achieving certain benefits, which is why they keep coming back. Benefits can include things like very experiential things, like a cocktail reception with the captain or lunch with the officers. Now, so as we all keep our fingers crossed for whether it's airlines and hotels and cruising as they start to pick up business again, I'll take a step back in terms of what Princess did several years ago. A lot of research and work done understanding our customers, and a big part of that was our CLV initiative, where we really tried to understand, as you were alluding to, Ahmad, about like, hey, what drives customer lifetime value? Demographic info certainly was a big part of it. The income level, where a guest resided. You mentioned with Dollar Shave Club, rural versus urban. There's certain areas similar to that based on where people lived. Age, gender, etc. Destinations, what was their first purchase? Was it a cruise to Alaska or a cruise to the Caribbean? And then purchases. So after they bought a cruise, people can still buy things. It could be they tend to buy, like that woman, you see that picture there, they go to buy perfume or maybe jewelry. They may buy alcoholic beverages. They may go to the casino. All of these behaviors help drive indicators of a customer's lifetime value. And of course, marketing vehicles, right? Which are, how did you reach that customer? Was it through social? Was it through paid search? Did they come through a referral? And I think importantly, the certain marketing vehicles did better than others. And I think what we found though is as you got to be able to deliver more targeted, relevant, personalized messages to the guest, you stood a better chance of both driving an initial purchase, but also driving a repeat purchase or upside purchases. So again, we all know about personalization, and personalization plays a big role in driving relevant content and marketing to drive lifetime value. And the final thing I'll allude to at the bottom, the travel advisor analysis, some of this we did with Professor Peter Fader at Wharton, was the fact that where a cruise is sold from. A majority of our cruises are sold through our travel advisors, or you may know them as travel agents, whether it's Expedia, if you look on the bottom, Expedia, Cruise Planners, AAA, Costco. And what you find is not all travel advisor partners are equal. Some deliver very rich, high CLV type customers. Others deliver more modest. And so I think the key thing is for us to analyze, show this to our distribution partners and say, hey, how do we do better? Or how do we do more of what you're doing since you're doing so well? So the benchmarking with your distribution partners or travel advisor partners is such an important part of helping drive customer lifetime value. And again, Professor Fader was a big part in helping us assess customer lifetime value. And it was really important for sales to know how to analyze it and be able to provide tools so that, and what's important is if you're a travel advisor, you're tied to us because you're paid by commission, so that the more lifetime value you generate, the more commission you're going to get. So everybody's interests were very much aligned, which was so helpful. So I'll pause there and don't know if you have any questions, Ahmad, but that just gives you a little bit of a snapshot.
Yeah, I wanted to ask
important.
you like so what's interesting about what you mentioned is that you geared this towards sales, and like that's a very, very amazing use case, it seems like, of making sure that you're leveraging the understanding of current lifetime value and increasing it. I see a question here that's very much tied to that from Chuck Ball here, which is that given every business has tiers of customers with attached CLV, how to best market, or in this case, sales for each, to do sales or marketing to each, to get them to go move up to the next tier or next level, right? Like what strategies, and can you really say that everybody's ready to move to the next tier? And I want to hear your perspective, and maybe even like how did Peter Fader address that issue?
Yeah, and shout out to Chuck. Basically, I think it's interesting because you have tiers, and tiers could be based on, this is the top decile of high profitable customers, second decile. But sometimes it's hard to say what's the commonality, right? It's trying to understand that. I think that let's take it from a marketing perspective. The one thing that I'll say is that the more personalized you can make your messaging, we and like anybody else can see better ROI, right?
Yeah.
That can include simply a salutation, like your name, the appropriate name, the ability to do timing correctly, right? Some people may not respond to emails delivered in the morning. Maybe you're better off delivering at a different time of day. And that really is part of what, we all know about the marketing stack, doing A/B tests. I can't overemphasize how important it is to do A/B tests to see what is going to drive the trigger to get that guest to motivate and spend more and invest more. But I think there's no question there are certain segments. We find certain segments that respond better to food and beverage visuals, maybe some that respond better to shopping boutique visuals. The majority, of course, more destination visuals. So these are all things that I'm sure, depending on the category you're in, you just got to try it and see what can do it. Related to this, I just see a question, and I don't know if I'm looking at the same thing you. Jeffrey Shepard asked a question.
Yeah.
Do cruises act on this information on board the cruise? And that's an interesting, and the answer is yes, to an extent. For one of the things that Princess launched was something called the Ocean Medallion, and it's part of the Princess Medallion class experience. What it is that all guests are given a medallion, which is a Bluetooth smart wearable, which allows us to do contactless check-in, contactless payment. But it also, because of the real-time data, it allows, for example, a bartender. So if Ahmad was walking to the bar, in theory, the bartender could say, well, welcome back, because the bartender recognizes that Ahmad is a repeat customer, has been to the cruise 20 times, right? How many times have you checked into a hotel and the hotel says, Imad, have you been with us before? And for you to say, yeah, this is my 15th time, a lot of times they just don't know it. And I think that's frustrating for a customer who's loyal. But I think with the power of the Ocean Medallion and the ecosystem that was created, Princess is able to deliver these personalized experiences on board to help drive additional consumption. So good question, Jeffrey, on that.
Awesome. There's one more question that's that I think I can help answer, which is like the question was around learning the CLV drivers. How can you use this in new customer advertising? So it's a really good question, because you can include in the independent variables like what kind of creative they saw, what kind of channel they came in through, or what like path or journey they took. So that can help answer that question. And one example of this I think of is where we work with a company where they're targeting their women's cosmetic product, and they're targeting women of certain demographics because their product works really well for them. But in the beginning, they were targeting all demographics of women, and it didn't work for a certain demographic. And it's not that they wouldn't convert; they were able to convert those customers, but the lifetime value was super low. And all of a sudden, you're like, hey, you know what? Is this a product market fit problem, or is it a marketing problem? So marketing is doing a good job of acquiring them because they can get really good messaging out the door, but the product doesn't really work for that business, that customer.
Yeah, and I think I always look at things in three buckets. You just talked about it. Product market fit. So is the product the right fit to the customers you're trying to do, the behavior, the motivations for them? Is your marketing appropriate, right? Is it the appropriate marketing, the right message? And then, of course, distribution channel, which I just talked about in terms of our travel advisors. Different distribution channels can have an impact on the type of customers you get. So again, product fit, the marketing that you use, as well as the distribution channels. Those all three, I think, interrelate to help drive whether or not they're working. And sometimes they don't work because one is like the market fit isn't working. It doesn't matter what you're marketing. If you have a bad product fit, it's just your marketing is not going to do very well. Good point.
Great. Let's maybe you want to chat a little bit about CLV initiatives at Disney and your experience there.
Sure. So some of this is me as kind of an industry observer, some from primary experience. Right now, for those of you who are shareholders of the Disney, congratulations. It's pretty much been in the all-time high for the last couple of months, or near the all-time high. And you would say, how is that possible? Given the pandemic, given the fact that Disneyland and California Adventures closed, the theme parks are at limited capacity, the theaters are largely closed. And it's largely due to Disney Plus. And Disney Plus has been a huge success for them. 80 some 7 million subscribers in the first year, which is no small feat that they announced in their December investor day. In fact, after announcing the 87 million subscribers, which was, I think, a couple years ahead of schedule in terms of where they would be, and they also announced the new content that they would be creating from Marvel, Star Wars, and Disney, the stock went up 15%, or about $45 billion in additional market cap. And so I think what you're seeing is, there's no question, the value of the Walt Disney Company, a big chunk of the value of the Walt Disney Company is Disney Plus and its success in the whole streaming wars category. And when you think about this big focus on Disney Plus, again, only 1 year old, it's a subscription service, and it's the epitome of lifetime value, right? How much are you spending to acquire customers? That could be marketing, but also the billions of dollars of content that you have to make, right? So how many new customers can you acquire? What's the cost of that? How many will you retain? How many of the existing customers will you retain? And then finally, are you able to raise price? Disney Plus, as you know, is at $6.99 in terms of price, but if you buy for a year, it's like under $6, less than half what Netflix is getting per user. Netflix is getting about $14+ per user. And so Disney has a long way to go. And in terms of their pricing power, a lot of it's going to be, can they get the appropriate content to catch up to Netflix, which I think a lot of people think they are, based on the announcements of things like WandaVision, which premiered a couple weeks ago to much success. They've got other series coming out, the new Boba Fett spinoff from Mandalorian. So I think there's a lot of positivity going around for Disney Plus. But ultimately, I think the key for Disney Plus and everything with the data that they have access to is that until they can get all these new series made, complicated, of course, by COVID to some extent, that slowed up production for everybody, is can they use data to leverage the content they do have? I'll give you an example, Imad. Let's assume that while you wait for the next Star Wars series or the next Marvel series, let's say you're a 30-year-old, but maybe you grew up with some Disney animation like Ducktales. I don't know if you remember the show Ducktales, Imad, but let's say they were able to target a message and say, hey, we're going to have a DuckTales marathon coming up next week. You might say, oh my goodness, I want to share this with my 3-year-old because this is what I grew up with. That's the power of data, and also leveraging things so you can get better lifetime value, even though maybe you don't have the extent of content that Netflix has yet. Now, I'm going to move on to the second point to think about, which is, as they move towards this more recurring revenue model, think about the change it's been from a typical Disney studio model, or even the theatrical model, which is launching these big blockbuster movies to theaters like AMC and so forth, right? We know Avengers Endgame, the partnership with AMC, Cinemark, all these movie theaters made it a huge profit center for the Walt Disney Company, #1 movie box office of all time. But the difficulty of the traditional model, which is not necessarily gone, but it's changing, is that for every Avengers Endgame, you may have a movie that wasn't a hit, such as Treasure Planet. Treasure Planet was meant to be a big hit, an action adventure show that could continue, but didn't do as well. So, and it's hard to predict. You may think everything pencils out on paper, but it doesn't. The audiences just don't turn up, or maybe the product doesn't finish out to be as good as you'd like it to be. And so I think the other thing to think about is that in the traditional model, a lot of the relationships with the customers and the data is owned by the theaters like AMC, or even these cable operators like Comcast or Spectrum. They are the ones that have the data. And I think it's changing now. With Disney Plus having 80+ million subscribers, they have the direct-to-consumer relationship for the most part. They have the data, which hopefully, as I mentioned, will allow them to upsell and promote loyalty, because people will say, oh, there's a lot more content that I didn't know about, because typically people are waiting for the next Star Wars series or Marvel series. But now that you have a direct-to-consumer relationship, hopefully you can leverage the library content that you have. And the final thing I'll mention, that Disney Movie Rewards on the right, that I'll say is that we recognized this over 10 years ago, that we didn't have data. And in order to help drive a direct-to-customer relationship, we did create a loyalty program called Disney Movie Rewards, which had millions of subscribers and helped promote upsells and people to purchase ongoing Disney purchases. And that, I think, was a good basis, together with what Disney.com did in terms of getting people to register. It provided a foundation for Disney Plus to have to acquire customers from the get-go. The final thing I'll leave is the cancellation of the beloved Disneyland annual pass, which we may have heard about last week. A lot of news, a lot of loyal customers upset that their annual pass is being canceled. But I think this is really summed up to lifetime value. When you think about the fact that, like a cruise ship or an airplane, there's only so much space available at the theme park for the customers. And with the limited capacity, let's say they reopen up with 25, 35, 40% capacity, Disney's going to want to have the highest spending customer in each of those slots. And as you may know, the annual pass holder, as great as they are, they don't spend as much money typically. They don't go and buy the Mickey ears or the plush toy or that the 20, maybe the food, the churros, all the stuff that they might buy because they've been there before and they are going there for the experience. So I think Disney has realized this is a good opportunity for them to reset their loyalty program, really take a hard look at what they need to change so they can maximize the lifetime value for the number of slots they have available at the park. So
that's cool. I was going to ask you one question about Disney Plus, and I think that what we've seen working with streaming businesses is, if you think about customer lifetime value from a monetary perspective, they're charging a fixed amount of money, so like it all comes down to like what the retention looks like. But the other equation that we were thinking about was lifetime value from time spent perspective. So you switch out the currency from monetary value to like, how often is somebody coming back to actually use the app and how much time are they spending in it, and use that as a metric to compute customer lifetime value, because that's a forward looking metric versus like, they're about to cancel their subscription because they haven't used the service in a long time.
Absolutely. I think that's a big predictor, right? If you don't have people using the app, they're not finding utility out of it. So some people, of course, will just forget about it and they'll just pay the monthly hit on their credit card, or maybe they prepaid for a year. But ultimately, you want to drive usage. The best way to drive retention is to drive utilization and usage of your product. You have to. And if they're not using it, they're not getting it. And that goes back to what I was saying, Imad, is that if let's say they just went through the whole series of Mandalorian, right? And they've caught up on the 2 episodes of WandaVision. Maybe there's 3 now. They may say, I'm done. I'm going to cancel, and maybe I'll resume in a year. A lot of people are doing this. They sign up, they binge watch, and then they cancel, right? That's a problem for these streaming services. But if you were to say, hey, don't cancel, did you know we have, I'm going to use Ducktales as an example, we have all, 128 episodes of Ducktales, and we're going to have a marathon with commentary by Huey, Dewey, and Louie, or whatever it may be. That might be, oh, okay, I didn't even think of that. So I think it's going to be important for all these folks to harness their data to figure out, based on what Imad is like, what is the shows that I have that he might want to watch? And Netflix has been doing this for over a decade, right? Netflix has been tailoring their marketing such that they'll say, okay, Imad's more into action adventure. We're going to promote that aspect of this show versus maybe, and not to be stereotypical, but because you told me you had to binge watch Bridgerton. Is that right? Am I right, Imad? That's what your wife made you watch?
Right.
I shouldn't say made you watch, but I think it's made you watch Bridgerton.
It's on now. Now it's on recording.
Okay, sorry about that, but I think that's where the tailor is of the market, and that's why you have different logins, right? Think about Netflix; you have different logins, right? Is this Imad? This is your wife, because they can try to tailor based on who you are rather than a household level.
Exactly. No, this is really fantastic. I appreciate it, folks. If you guys have any other questions, please keep them coming. We're going to skip one slide and move on to our next topic just to keep ourselves on time. And this is probably a little bit more of a quantitative section of our discussion today, which is understanding the impact of COVID. So now that we've had, enough number, quite a bit of time has happened since COVID started, and you can start to understand the behavior of customers that you acquired during COVID versus the customers that you didn't. Thinking about this, these are the questions that we're getting asked by the C-suite. How different are new cohorts compared to previous cohorts, and how much existing cohorts have changed their behavior? So Gordon, I want to ask you, right, like, put yourself back at any of the companies you were at, like, how would you address this problem or go after this?
Yeah, I think that again, because some people have pivoted, they've tried new distribution mechanisms, let's say curbside pickup, or maybe they've launched new types of products to cater to this new COVID, COVID times. That could be a new cohort because you got a new customer. You mentioned the McKinsey study. So I think they need to track these different cohorts of like, here are the existing customers I had pre-COVID. Looks like I've had new behaviors post-COVID. And I think that it's important for them to track these segments of cohorts and see if you can get them to behave, sustain behavior differently through marketing, through different product upsells and so forth. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Ima, you've looked at some categories and seen what the
Yeah,
impact is on some things. And it might be useful for the audience because I think you pretty much have access to every category, but let's just show some of the ones that you've picked
yeah.
out.
Let's go through some charts. So this is based on some panel data that we purchased for different businesses, and I think this will reveal how we think about this and hopefully give you the audience some tools to walk away with. So the way I think about it is two things: inter cohort and intra cohort behavior. So intra cohort is how do customers that I had acquired prior to COVID, how has their behavior changed? And inter cohort is what's the difference between cohorts that were acquired pre and post COVID. And this chart, the customer cohort chart, is a really revealing one because without actually having to do any math, you can kind of see what's going on. So let's first take a look at the chart and then we'll go into like the different types of businesses. So the very simplest thing you're looking at is number of customers active in any given month for this online furniture business. And you can see like, prior to COVID, it's about 6,000, a little over 6,000. COVID hits, all of a sudden they're acquiring double the number of, or they have active customers that are double that number each month. But underneath it, you can see how different cohorts are driving that behavior. So each month, some number of customers get acquired, and you can see what percentage of them stay active. Now, the way to like look at it from a just eyeballing this problem question is you can see this little, like if you look at all the old cohorts, you can see a nice little bump that's happening for these old cohorts. So what's happening is as COVID happens, even the old cohorts, they have to change their behavior because they have to now purchase any furniture they were purchasing before online. They have to do it. They don't have any choice. So you can see that their behavior changes. On top of that, all the customers who weren't previously customers, a lot of customers who weren't previously customers are having to purchase online. So you can see a new, like a whole set of cohorts that are coming in that are now also purchasing online. And you can observe their behavior different, that may or may not be slightly different from the previous cohorts. So you can kind of see what's happening to online furniture business, and that makes a lot of sense that like they have no other option. They can't go in the store and they're having to purchase. Now, what's interesting about prescription eyewear, which is different from online furniture business, they're acquiring a steady number of customers, online, offline, but they see a huge drop in customer base, both new acquisitions, and you can see even their previous cohorts see a little bit of a dip that's less than a seasonal dip that they would normally see if you look at the previous cohorts. And that's the intra transaction behavior changing as well. And maybe that's got to do, and Gordon, maybe you could come up with your hypothesis, but my feeling is that like less people feel the need to switch out their prescription eyewear.
Yeah, and they just don't want to go visit an optometrist at this point. They just don't want to expose themselves to. So I think that again, the behaviors where you had to go offline or go somewhere, we've seen they've all been impacted to some extent.
Yeah. Now these charts like are really interesting. We have a tool that like spits out these charts for any type of business, so we get to see this. So let's take a look at a couple of other ones. In-store coffee business. So if you're a large coffee seller, you can see that you're not really acquiring a lot of new customers every month. You're mostly just keeping your previous customers, but that in-store shutting down during COVID, huge impact on the business. The current customers stopped drinking coffee and lack of new customer acquisition. And then you see a pretty nice recovery that's starting to happen, but still pretty subdued behavior. And there's a long way to go before this behavior recovers completely. versus online pet food. So the reason I picked this online pet food here to show as an example is that this behavior didn't really change very much. If you were buying online pet food before, you're still buying online pet food. Like you can see that this older cohort, pretty much unchanged behavior. But they do have a little bump of new customers who didn't decide, who never had purchased online pet food, but now were forced to. So they're seeing a nice little bump there, which shows that there's probably no impact on older cohorts, but new customers are joining, and there's going to be some percentage of them that stick around based on the time that the light that they saw by buying pet food online. Any questions on any of these? I'm hoping that this answers some of the questions around thinking about how to think about customers acquired during COVID and existing customers that were active. I see one question here which says, although most Disney Plus customers were really not new customers, but rather extensions of existing customer value, Disney content will be critical to retention post-pandemic, when streaming may not be as attractive as we reopen the rest of the society. What do you, any thoughts on that, Gordon?
Yeah, I think Chuck's got a good point, as he said that the Disney content will be critical to retention post-pandemic. I think he's right. Both the library of Disney content that they have, the Disney Vault, which some of you may be aware of, movies that have not been available typically. They're only out for a limited time. Many of them are now available, if not all of them available on Disney Plus, plus the new content that people are looking forward to. I agree with Chuck. Chuck asked the question, do you think Princess Recovery will look more like a coffee pot or a pet food chart? I don't know. That's an interesting question. I think that since it's pretty much zero, you're going to see a rapid increase, right, when it starts becoming business. I think the question is I think that there's enough pool of existing customers that there will be some that can't wait to go because they just love to cruise. And those who are more casual cruisers, when they hear from friends and family that it's safe and that it's really good, they'll go back on. And then the question is, will the new cruisers cohorts, will they come? And that's driven by word of mouth. So if there's positive word of mouth from the industry, and this is where media will be a big part of it, because the media, I think, had a lot of fun. I wouldn't say fun, but the media really went after the cruise industry in terms of talking about various things about what happened. And I think if it turns out the cruise industry reopens in a positive way, no incidents, hopefully the positive word of mouth will get it going again. And I think that applies to some extent to hotels and airlines, right? The last thing an airline wants is some sort of pandemic to happen as a result of a flight. And I think they've done a good job of keeping their planes safe. And I think that's what the cruise industry is going to have to do as well. Good question.
Yeah, I feel like, all the other thing I think about cruise industry is the inter-transaction time is so long that this will just be a blip, like where it goes down and comes back with a little bit of a spike based on, for current customers at least, and new customers, it totally makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah, but we already know there's very strong 2021 pent-up demand. It's just a matter of when they can start cruising again. And so everyone's keeping their fingers crossed for vaccines and the whole bit. So there we go.
Yeah. One other way to look at this behavior is value of cohorts acquired by month of customer acquired, right? So this is another chart that gets spit out by this quality of customer report, where you can look at how the trend is changing. So this is for the online furniture business. You can see that like they were just trending down slowly, but like the value of the customer cohorts that they were acquiring during pandemic dipped down, and then over time, as they acquired even more customers, the value is going down, and that's something they ought to do something about. These can change over time, right? Like you can obviously increase the value of cohorts you previously acquired as well, but given this is something you can monitor over time, generally fairly easily if you can predict the customer lifetime value. And one last thing I'll leave everyone with is, if anybody's interested in these charts and find these interesting, we just launched a product that can do this, and for everybody at least who attended this panel, we'll make sure that you guys get a complimentary version of this. So if you just search on Google quality of customers report, this will be the first link that shows up, and you'll be able to request it or get started. And I know it says like do it for the board meeting, but this is very relevant for even marketing or finance teams as well. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't pay too much attention to that. But
Yeah.
if you go ahead and click start.
Yeah. And I'll just do like just a plug for you, Ahmad, and what you've done at Retina. In addition to this quality of customer report, which I think everyone should try to take advantage of, is that I wish at Princess or Disney if we had some of the services you had at Retina, because I think what's amazing is not only do you do probably the very comprehensive looking at lifetime value, but in case people missed the beginning, one of the things that I thought was very interesting what Retina can do is just based on the initial purchase or even pre-purchase, being able to have a good sense of what the lifetime value of that customer is early on in the customer journey, which because of your proprietary models and data, I think that's really cool. So, just wanted to make sure people are aware and I think so many people now have pivoted to e-commerce and they have all these digital signals and first party data. Hopefully everyone's harnessing the lifetime value so they can make more profit and return for their company. And but some of the tools you offer up, like the quality customer report and others, are very valuable. Imad, there is a couple. I don't know if you want to take the time. I know we're at time, but there's people that have asked about the pet food slide, but
Yeah,
maybe
I
you
think
want to
let's
keep
go
going.
back to that. We'll come back to that in Q&A. How about that? And if we
Yeah,
have no other questions, I want to make sure that why don't we just make sure that everybody has got the key takeaways, and then the folks who want to stick around for any more Q&A can. So here are the key concepts that we talked about today, and Gordon, I'll pass it over to you. From my perspective, manage what you measure, customer lifetime value, talking about what marketing or distribution channels or actions lead to higher CLV and understanding that, and then COVID and understanding both intra and inter cohort behavior of your customers is probably one of the key things you can do to understand what the impact of COVID on your business was. Anything else to add to that, Gordon?
No, I agree. For those who come in from marketing, a lot of times it's about efficiency of spend. Hey, how long does it take me to acquire a customer? The CAC part of it, right? Cost of acquisition. But I think that to the extent that you haven't, you need to add that back end, which was the revenue that you showed on that on the other slide, because it's really about, are you getting profitable customers? And for those of you who are capturing both, great. If you aren't, I think it's imperative that you find a way to put that as part of your dashboards.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Gordon. Let's go into Q&A. If anybody has any other Q&A, please, or questions, please let me know. And then maybe while we wait for more questions to come in, let's quickly go back to the pet food chart. And there are a couple of questions there.
Because there was a couple in the chat. Like one is on the pet food slide, what do the purple mean? I assume new customers, but how do they differ from prior customers? And related to that, on the pet food chart, they said it looks like the cohorts acquired in early COVID months have higher repeat business than previous cohorts. Am I reading that correctly? Right. So if you look at early COVID months, it seems like those people have providing more value maybe than the earlier business. I don't know if that's true or not, Imad.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true by just looking at it. So in the real chart, in the actual chart, you'd be able to hover over it and it would tell you percentages. So what you want to look at is as a percentage of this customer number. So let's say 13.6K customers acquired, and then as a percentage of 13.6K, what percentage came back month number one compared to customers, let's say, that were acquired all the way back here in January, 11.9K, and what percentage came back of that. And visually, I think you might be right. It's very clear that the January cohort maybe didn't have the same kind of retention as the March or April cohort over here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a question about
the question was purple and blue, right? That was the question.
Now, what does the purple mean on the pet food slide?
Oh, on the pet food slide, I'm not seeing the purple.
Well, let's say the upper right. I think that's you're just using color to differentiate new people
differentiate
that came in.
The different cohorts. Yeah, exactly. The more purple it is, the more newer the cohort is. Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Question from Marcy about cruising. Is the cruise industry losing market share to smaller ship adventure travel cruises? No, I think that's all additive. Again, to your question about Marcy about what's happening in the cruise category, at least pre-COVID, because so many people have not taken a cruise. we feel that different types of cruise lines will be expanding the base, whether it's the new cruises by Virgin or these adventure, smaller ship adventure travel cruises. A lot of people may do that cruise, and maybe they won't, initially they'll try that, and then they might try a bigger ship. I think that at this point, there's less market share loss. It's more about, can we do the right products to expand the category? I think that's what's happening more in the cruise category. Good question.
Another question is what resources are good for understanding CLV at the fundamental level? There are plenty, but the one that I'll put a plug for is if you go to retina.ai/academy. So our wonderful marketing manager, Carolyn, has put this together where she's collected all the resources that we were able to find and put this into like a very like manageable coursework, and it's all available for free. So you can kind of go for it understanding introduction to LTV to like the more advanced use cases through here.
So that was that retina.ai/academy?
Yeah.
Cool.
See that here. Let's see, any other ones? All right, I think I'm looking at. All right, I think that's all of the ones that I see here. We're finally ending on time. This is great. I appreciate, first of all, thank you so much, Gordon, for taking the time to join us for this webinar and share your insights. Thank you to everybody who attended and participated and shared thoughtful questions. And thank you so much to Carolyn and the Retina team to put this together. Gordon, I'll let you say a few words and then we'll close it out.
No, thank you, Imad. I wish we had access to Retina back in the time, but I think it's a really useful tool. I think that for everybody, as with COVID and if people have pivoted to try new distribution channels, maybe new products, etc. I think it's incumbent upon us to analyze it and figure out what are the best tools to understand, hey, are these cohorts valuable or not? And ultimately, the more you can do specific personalized behaviors against these different segments, it's generally going to yield better ROI. So I think the key is, how can you use the tools to be more efficient? And good luck in everybody's journey on CLV. It's a fun journey, and let's hope we all hope we get vaccinated shortly and get back to some semblance of the new normal.
Looking forward to it. And thanks, everyone. I've shared the emails, Gordon's email here on the chat as well. If you'd like to reach out to him, please